Welcome back to the Director's Garage. I am your host and resident idiot, Michael, and today, folks, we're heading into the Wild Wild West. It's a shootout unlike any we've ever done before, so draw! Too much? Well, I'll tell you what's too much. It's the cost of all of these headphones. We're talking more than $30,000 in cans. And when you factor in all the gear, the cord, the Macintosh, the Woo, the reel-to-reel deck, the Ferrum stack, it adds up to more than $85,000 in gear. Folks, this is madness. I could have a Ferrari. But let's meet the headphones. First up is last year's winner, the Hifiman Susvara. $6,000 of nearly impossible to drive tech, all wrapped in luscious aluminum. It's only going to get dumber, guys. Okay, and then we fall into the abyss. Last year, we had the OG Abyss. This year, we've stepped up to the TC version and the more than $2,000 superconductor cable. Will that make a difference? And then at $4,500, we've got these right here. We've got a pair of Audezes. We've got a Carbon, or Kerbin, if you prefer. And then we've got the magnificent LCD-5. The LCD-4 comes in at $4,000, as does the Meze Elite. And the OG Focal Utopia was $4,000 back in the day. Now there's a new one. It's $5,000. And then bringing up the rear is the ZMF Atrium, one of the best looking headphones in this bunch. 8 of the finest headphones ever made, and we're breaking them down today, and I'm going to do my best to rank them. This is all subjective, and my rankings most certainly will not match your rankings, but this is going to be a lot of fun, and feel free to put your comments down below. The stakes are high. I will be selling a number of these headphones as a result of this shootout. Let's just get a few things out of the way before we start. First is the obvious. These are all open back headphones. I did not include the Sennheiser HD820, the Meze Lyric, or the Audeze LCD-XC. The comparisons were getting out of hand, so eliminating the closed back seemed to be kind of a logical step. We can do that maybe in a separate shootout in the future. Now next are the sins of omission. And y'all have let me have it on the community page. Why don't you try this headphone? And it's not a real shootout without that headphone. And I know I don't have the Stax X9000, and I have the OG Focal Utopia, not the Utopia 2022. Because it's $5,000 frickin' dollars, and this channel loses money by the minute. So subscribe to the Director's Garage. Help a brother out. The other headphones I do wish I could get that X9000 from Stax in here. I think the new Expanse from Dan Clark Audio would have been a natural fit in this crowd, as would the Utopia 2022. But trust me, for the purposes of this show, 8 is enough. Now, some of these headphones were purchased at a discount thanks to help from Audio46.com, which is the best place to buy all of your headphone gear. If you use the coupon code Director's Garage, all one word, at checkout, you can save an extra 5% on most of the gear they carry, while kicking a little money back to this channel. I don't do memberships or Patreon, at least not yet anyway, so subscribing here and using my affiliate links is really the only way to kind of support what I'm doing here with all of this stuff. So with that said, it's time to light this candle. All right, let's get it started with ergonomics. You knew it was going to be that, right? Now, I know people who could care less about the ergos. They're all about the sound. But if a headphone hurts to wear, if you cringe just looking at it, if they feel plasticky or springy, or they resonate when you put sound through them, more importantly, I'm out. And there is one clear winner in this category, and it's the Meze Elite. And easily, it's the most comfortable of these 8 contenders. They're comfortable, they're cozy, they are a joy to wear, and look at. There is nothing not to love about the Meze. Now next is these right here. It's the ZMF Atrium, and the quality of this headphone can't be understated. Everyone who sees these things is impressed, and they win on looks alone, and then you put them on and they're so cozy. Maybe a touch on the heavy side, but man, this is a great package. Now, the Carbon is next. They're very comfortable, but it loses points because of the stacks fart situation. Believe me, it's a thing. Go look at that episode. Now, at least it's not as painful as when I first bought them. Audeze did a tweak, but then we've got a tie between the Susvara and the LCD-4. The Susvara is comfy enough, but it's a flimsy design, and the LCD-4 is chunky and heavy, but very comfortable and very well built. Now the Focal is clampier and creaky, but it scores high on looks. I still think that's a beautiful headphone. Next comes the ugliest headphone of the lot. It's the Audeze 1266TC. Though they're not as uncomfortable as they look, these things are simply not pretty. And then in last place, you've got the Audeze LCD-5. Yes, the design is gorgeous, and it's very much like the LCD-4, but lighter. But there's an angle shape on the cup, and that means they make constant contact with your ear, which leads to discomfort and fatigue. Let's check out the scorecard. All right, time to start breaking down the sound. That's what we're here for, right? Well, let's start with the sound properties. And before I get into specifics, the surprises in these categories has to be, first of all, the Carbon, which scored remarkably high across the board. And in fact, Audeze owned a lot of these categories. Even the LCD-4, which is ancient really in this crowd, still holds its own with respect and authority. So we're going to start with the imaging, and it's the LCD-5 right at the top. It was neck and neck with its sister electrostatic, the Carbon, but to my ears it edged out the Carbon in the image. I'm talking about the specific location the sound of each instrument comes from within the soundstage. Now, third was the Susvara, which surprised me. This was the #1 headphone last year, and it slipped behind the two Audezes, but time and again, the Audezes had better placement that was locked to a pinpoint. Now, the LCD-4 made a remarkable showing against its younger classmates. In fifth was the OG Utopia, which has always been a fantastic imaging headphone. Sixth was the Audeze TC. It's more of a soundstage headphone, not an imaging headphone, and the Atrium and Meze gave me the worst images. Now, before you go thinking, oh, the Elite and the Atrium, well, they image like hell, they really don't. They both presented a specific image, but what's different about those two is that they weren't quite as locked in position to my ears, not as precise as the rest of the field. Now, I want to stress, all of these headphones image well. This is the top of the top, folks, but the two Audezes and the Susvara really were just next level. Check out the scores on the image. All right, moving on to soundstage, and we're going to see some massive shifts here, starting with the Audeze 1266TC leads the field in soundstage. These things go wider than any headphone in this bunch, and they are simply a headphone that gives you an amazing spatial presentation. There are sounds coming at you from far and near. You can't help but get a smile on your face from the soundstage on the 1266TC. Now the Carbon is next. It just impressed me every time I went to put them on, and the LCD-5 followed in third. The Susvara came in fourth in this field. They were better really at imaging. Now the LCD-4 was 5th, and the Elite really surprised me with a strong showing in Soundstage after last year's Empyrean kind of meltdown. Now the Atrium sounded wide in some situations and narrower in others. Because of this inconsistency, I moved them down on this list, and the Focal has a notoriously near sound field. They could not keep up with this pack. I'd note that the difference between, say, the LCD-5, and which is the 3rd place headphone, and the Meze Elite, we're talking fractions here. The Abyss and the Carbon, though, were well ahead of this field. Let's check out the Soundstage scores. Detail. That ability to pick out every little nuance, the length and the smoothness of the decay on the reverb, and every little pop and click of my turntable. I'm kidding. Sort of. Now, the good news is all the headphones performed quite well in detail retrieval, but the LCD-5 really takes it for me. You can hear the frickin' cymbals vibrate. I pulled out a bunch of Fleetwood Mac tracks for this. They're so well recorded, and Mick hits with such force on the drums, and he'll crash a cymbal and then he'll ride the hi-hat, and you just pick out all of that little decay and nuance. It's just gorgeous. The Susvara picked up just a little less detail, but it was really close, and the Carbon came in just maybe a little behind these two, which is something, I guess, of a surprise for me. I expected the Carbon to be the most resolving, but to my ears, the Susvara and LCD just bested it. Now, all of these 3 headphones performed exceptionally, within hairs of each other, really, and I wouldn't argue if you found one or the other better to your ears. Now, the next 2 were equally close. We're talking about the Abyss 1266 and the LCD-4. The Abyss is a bit tougher to nail down because the Soundstage is so frickin' wide that some of the micro detail happens off in the extremes, and I think they may fool you into thinking maybe they're a little less resolving than they actually are. Now, the LCD-4 is remarkable for its age. I'm shocked it can hang with this crowd, and it really does. And this headphone is no question a detail monster. The other surprise to me was the Elite. Meze has improved the detail retrieval of that Renaro driver. It's not as resolving as those at the top, but they make a respectable showing now, and the Utopia is right behind. They still impress me despite their years. They aren't competing for the most resolving, but I doubt you'd listen to these and feel like you're somehow missing out. Now, the Atrium has a slight tuning disadvantage. They're a darker headphone, and that gives the presentation of lacking maybe a little detail. There is plenty of detail here, but it's just a little less impressive maybe than the others. So here's the detail scores. Let's check them out. Next up is Detail's little sister. We're talking speed here, how sharp and crisp those notes hit, the sound of the stick on the skin of the snare, that crack, and how sharp that is. And for me, it's the Carbon, hands down. Notes hit as sharp as a tack. They are everything you'd expect from an electrostatic experience. Describing the speed of the Carbon, the word that comes to my mind is wicked. Second for me is the Abyss 1266 TC. The jump between the original 1266 and this TC version cannot be overstated. These are a completely different headphone technically from the original Abyss. Now, third is another Audeze headphone, the LCD-5, not surprising, crazy fast, and all 3 at the top are really fast to the note. Not too far behind the LCD-5 is kind of an upset here. It's the LCD-4. 5th, though, was really a big surprise, the Susvara. Now, this was near the top of the field last year. It just didn't sound as sharp as these newer headphones I've gotten in here by direct comparison. Not to say that it's still not a crazy fast headphone. The Focal makes a respectable showing. No one has ever accused that beryllium driver of being slow, and the Elite is where I found kind of maybe a fall off in some of the speed, and the Atrium just lacked the snap of the others in the field. Generally though, all of these headphones are impressive when it comes to speed, and I honestly can't say that any of them were disappointing. So let's check out the speed results. Well, now we get into some of the fun categories, and I'm going to start with dynamics. I love dynamics, that ability to surprise and delight with bursts of sound and slam and still shrink down for those quiet passages. Now, as these categories start to accumulate, you start realizing the Abyss really does make quite an impression, and they are so diverse in the different types of music that it renders well. Case in point is the dynamics. These things just slam, and if slam isn't your thing, you just push the speakers closer together and the slam recedes a bit into the mix. The Meze Elite nearly takes this category, but the Abyss just slams with better texture and definition. But if you want pure slam, yeah, the Elite has it. Now, they are loads of fun and present surprises with consistency. The LCD-4 is another headphone that won me over. I found myself reaching for this headphone more and more as I've had them for a longer period of time. It's a physical experience on the LCD-4, and they are a ton of fun. Now, these don't have the slam of the top three, but when it comes to ramping up sound fast, again, speed, it's the Carbon that really amazes. Now, I put the Atrium next, and this is where the field really starts to kind of split a bit. The Atrium doesn't dig as deep as I'd like, but there is a lot of force behind the sound that amps up the fun factor. I describe the Atrium as sounding thick, but less punchy. Don't undersell, though, how great that thickness sounds. No other headphone sounds quite like the Atrium, and I mean that as a supreme compliment. The Susvara has a lot of speed, but they lack the physicality of the other top headphones in this category. The Focal still has the fun factor on the right tracks. You just have to deal with some of that brightness they present. And lastly is the LCD-5, which falls more in that reference than fun category. They're not really punchy. The LCD-5 rolls off the most in the bass, and they keep things lean and neutral. So here are your scores on dynamics. Instrumentation. Some people would rather me call this realism. I don't really care. It's how real instruments sound when they're playing through the headphones. And I think the Susvara really still holds its own here. There's nothing quite like a violin or a horn on the Susvara. The LCD-5 is very close. Both of you give a sense of real instruments in a room. I think the Susvara does it a little bit better, but if you're a fan of Blue Note jazz, the LCD-5 may be the best device ever created to deliver that pure jazz analog experience. The sound is so uncolored and so fast, it's one of the purest experiences you'll ever have. The LCD-5 is shy of sub bass, as we'll see when we get to sound structure, but an acoustic bass doesn't really dig into the sub naturally. And that's what makes the LCD-5 stand out. Now, the Carbon also scores high here. There is shade behind the top two to my ears. The Elite follows. There's nothing wrong with the Elite or the LCD-4 even. They're just not in that top group. And next is the Abyss, which I thought kind of played around with the sound a little bit too much, kind of colored it a bit. The Focal, to my ears, goes a little too bright for realism, although the mids still impress me very much with vocals and stringed instruments. Now, the Atrium kind of does the opposite. They present a darker take on the instruments, but it shouldn't be lost on anyone that the top three headphones in this category seem to produce the least amount of bass. Let's check out the scores for realism. All right, next we're talking neutrality. And if you're looking for a headphone that won't color the sound at all, look no further than the LCD-5. I think Audeze was going for the most resolving headphone they could create, but give it a neutrality that is perfect for mixing in the studio. If I were making a record, this is the headphone I'd use for creating the final mix. There's a balance with the LCD-5 that no other headphone in this shootout can match. The unfortunate thing is, this shootout for me is about experience. It's about immersion and emotion. And the LCD-5, as great as it is representing what's on the recording, it doesn't wow me in the way that the other headphones do in this field. And that will come into play when it comes to rankings. Now, the Atrium is another headphone that finds terrific balance, but it's a darker presentation. The Susvara is fairly neutral. I think the upper mids and lower treble are too thin to call neutral, but the mids and the upper treble are very neutral. At the other end, you have headphones that really do color the sound, like the Elite, the Abyss, and the LCD-4. And I'm including this category because it's important to note that imaging and speed and Soundstage are not the only things that are important when it comes to listening. And though my tastes lean toward kind of a sound that's kind of colored, I prefer headphones that put on a show and wow me. There is a huge group in this hobby that prize accuracy and neutrality above all else, and there's nothing wrong with that. So let's take a look at those neutral rankings. So as I'm putting this episode together, the first cut was 50 minutes. Now, I'm not one of these million subscriber know-it-alls, but I do know enough about the YouTube to understand that y'all won't watch a 50-minute video. So I've decided to split this shootout into 3 parts. Now, this is the end of part 1. Part 2 is going to be the sound structure with bass and treble and mids and all that. Part 3 will be the final rankings. Now, the full 50 minutes are cut. It's in the can. And you won't have to wait but a day or two to get to the next part. I'm not going to be dragging this out for weeks. Don't worry, okay? So let's stop it right here, take a breath, and I'll be back with part 2 in just 2 days. Okay. Thanks for watching.